On today's episode of the College Lacrosse Show, we sit down with Maryland Terrapin Eric Spanos. Also chat about an incredible weekend for the sport. Maryland win over Notre Dame, Cornell's win over Richmond, Princeton's big set of wins down in North Carolina, lots of other good stuff, including FAFO of the week, Sicko of the week, and lots more. It's a great episode. Let's get right into it. Episode 5 of the College Lacrosse Show. All right, welcome back to the College Lacrosse Show. I am John Donville. You're Dan Arestia. Some real life stuff, some non-lacrosse stuff came up last week. There is real life outside of lacrosse that unfortunately you have to deal with every now and again, but pumped to be back on the podcast and happy to be back chatting with you. What's going on?
Yeah, that's what they keep telling me, is that there's stuff outside of lacrosse. I don't know. I'll run into it whenever I run into it, I guess. But things are good, man. It's like, you know, it was an exciting week in the lacrosse world. I think, you know, for me as a guy who watches up and down in the D3 world, the NESCAC got started this past weekend. The NESCAC is maybe the toughest conference in Division III. So, and that's defending champion Tufts is in there. So, you know, it's an exciting weekend for the D3 crowd. In the D1 world, we obviously had a number 1 versus number 2 game. We had all kinds of good stuff happening down in the state of North Carolina. It was a hell of a lacrosse weekend. And it feels like with March here that we have got our little early March Madness in lacrosse with some of the results we had, with some of the games and everything. So hell of a weekend for lacrosse for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly what I had written down. Just a good weekend for the sport. You know, I think a lot of good games, like, you know, 5-6 games that we could talk about on this show, and they were all pretty much fun games. And the Georgia Tech thing was a big win for the sport, I think. It was a really cool looking venue. They talked about it a lot in the broadcast, but the fact that they got rid of the football lines, it looked like a Final Four game, and obviously two teams that, you know, no one would be surprised to actually see in the Final Four. So I thought that was a great weekend for the sport. And then, you know, it's hard to draw like big narratives out of this season. And I think, you know, coming out of COVID, we had, you know, our Maryland 22 team, which obviously, you know, got on a pretty good roll there. And then the next year, you pretty much knew it was going to be Duke, Notre Dame, Virginia, you know, one of those three. I think any reasonable, you know, analyst probably was picking one of those three guys. So, or one of those three teams. And then, you know, we ended up seeing all of them in the Final Four. Notre Dame takes, and then last year, another kind of runaway train of a Notre Dame team. This is a different year. Like, Maryland is a very different 1 seed as of right now than we've seen. And especially with, you know, we've talked a lot about this show about conferences and, like, is it up year for the Ivy, down year for the Big Ten? Really hard to, like, draw conference over conference narratives so far. We have Big Ten, ACC, Ivy, Patriot, ACC, Big Ten, ACC, Big East. That's the top 10. So who's having a good year? Like, nobody but everybody. I don't know. It's just a very hard year to draw like these big brushstrokes.
Yeah, I know. And with Maryland, like they're number 1 right now. In the preseason and early in the year, we were like, well, who are the Maryland Stars? And honestly, like I'm not certain we still like, do they have stars? Is Maryland a number 1 team without star players? You know, we're going to have Eric Spanos in a little bit, so we'll talk to him about that. But, like, that's still a team where, you know, they're answering the questions we had about them. Who's going to replace Luke Weirman? Well, they have a 2-headed monster doing it in Crater and Creether. And, like, you know, who's going to be playing on defense for them with no Zapatello? Well, Will Schaller looks awesome. AJ Larkin looks awesome. Like, they go 5 deep at pole. You know, it's I think Maryland is a good little microcosm of like there's a lot of teams that are kind of doing it. We're not quite sure how they're doing it or like who they're doing it with on a weekly basis and who's going to be the star and who's the obvious go-to person here. But that's kind of the way the college lacrosse season is going as a whole right now.
Yeah. So you had the idea, we were talking about getting, you know, just in prepping for the show, but talking about how far down the top 20 list you have to go before, you know, you don't consider that team to be a national title, threat. So I think we could probably, Maryland, Notre Dame, Cornell, Princeton, Army, North Carolina, Hopkins. I think we'd probably agree those 7.
Would not be shocked at all if any or all of them are in the Final Four. Yeah, the exercise is like go through the top 20, see how far you can get yourself down the list before you say, all right, I don't think that's a Final Four team. Or I don't think, I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't there or if they lost early, that kind of thing. Because it'll take you a while to do it, and it's like that's what this season is becoming. And it's not always because all these teams are great. It's because the sport is so it's not random, but things can go any different way right now because everybody's very gettable. Everybody seems very beatable. Nobody is this unstoppable team. There is no clear and obvious they're a juggernaut. Nobody's going to knock them off. Everybody on this list is capable of playing a bad game and getting beaten by a team that maybe you didn't expect. So it's kind of go down there and find the team where it's if they're hot, they can go to the Final Four and see how far you can go down the top 20 to get there.
And the one that jumps off the page for me is Syracuse at 11. I don't think anyone would be super surprised to see them in the Final Four, especially 2 weeks ago. We were like, holy, look at this offense. A tough couple weeks. They've gotten humbled a little bit. I think they've probably gotten exposed on a few of their flaws. But they have lots of time to get it back, and they're talented and they're old. Who wants to see them? Denver at 16, they did make the Final Four last year. Penn and Virginia at 18 and 20, those teams are top 20 or top 10 talent teams that have gotten out to tough starts. It'd probably be a surprise at this point for given how they've started that either of those teams were to make a title run or a Final Four run, but it's not out of the question. I mean, Virginia does this every year. It's not unheard of that they could figure it out.
Yeah, I think, Virginia is obviously there's the talents is there. The recruits are there. They're trying to, I think, figure out their offense, and they're trying to figure out how to be successful when they're not running a track meet. I think that's been Virginia's kind of story this year is how do we get our 6-on-6 settled offense and defense figured out on both ends so that it's consistent and productive at both ends. Running up and down, that's the game they want to play, and they'll still beat anybody doing it. And you watch their Colgate game. Colgate wants to run up and down too. They want to just play with their hair on fire. And they played Virginia's game against them. And Virginia, of course, is going to dominate that game when they play it. So that's kind of, I think, a reason for that win for Virginia. But other teams have forced Virginia into, hey, let's just play 6-on-6 and not score transition goals and see if you can beat us. And Virginia struggled with that. So, I mean, I look at this. I think if I saw Richmond in the Final Four, I'd be surprised. I think if I saw Colgate there, I'd be surprised. Colgate only because they live dangerously. It makes them fun, but they do live dangerously. They are coming at you with 10-man rides. Yeah. It's just go, 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 all gas, no brakes all the time. It's very fun to watch. But I kind of made the comparison. In the NBA, there's I think it's Rob Perez does the League Pass rankings. Yeah, which is if you have League Pass and you can watch every team, who's the team that you want to put on TV first? Doesn't mean they're the best. It just means you're going to have a hell of a good time watching them. Colgate is near the top of the college lacrosse League Pass rankings because it's just going to be fun. They're going to come at teams like crazy all the time. Yeah. I think seeing Fairfield there, it pains me to say it, but if Fairfield made the Final Four, I'd be stunned.
Connecticut on Connecticut crime. Wow.
I know they beat up St. John's this week. I think they could win the CAA, but the Final Four, that's might be a bridge too far. I don't know if Navy can make it, but I get down to Harvard at 12, and you're telling me if Harvard can Sam King and Teddy Malone can score whatever 1 million goals a game, and Jerry can have their defense sorted out nicely, then they went into the Dome and won. They could do it. They can make the tournament. I think for me, it's once I get down to the 14, 15 neighborhood is when I start being I don't know. Even Denver, I don't know. They can't figure out what's going on in goal. They can't, win a face-off. So, but I think just the fact that I get down to 12, 13 teams where I'm not shocked at all if that's a Final Four team tells you a lot about the kind of season we're having.
Yeah, and I think it's like 12, 13, 14, where that's a Final Four, and like the top seven, would it be crazy to think any of them could actually win it? Like, I don't think so. Even Penn State, Duke, if they figure it out, like it's just unusual, and it's unusual in the post-COVID transfer era. It's not unusual for like college lacrosse. UNC in 2016 won as an 8 seed in the tournament. It's not. Virginia, when they were winning when they won before the pandemic, was not the 1 seed. It's not crazy to think that teams down the bracket a little bit can win it, but in the post-COVID era, it hasn't proven to be like that because of these the transfers and obviously just a few of the teams we've seen. So let's kind of parlay that into talking about the game of the weekend, game of the year so far, 1 versus 2. 10,000 people at Bobby Dodd Stadium, a great win for the sport. Credit to everyone who put that together. The Atlanta metro area is really a rising power in the sport. Urksa from there, a bunch of other guys as well. I got a ton of thoughts here, but why don't you lead us off? Kind of, what was your biggest takeaway from the game?
Yeah, I think obviously biggest takeaway, you kind of mentioned it there, was a 10,000, a 5-digit attendance number. 10,000 people at Bobby Dodd is awesome to see. I've always run kind of hot and cold on Atlanta as a market for lacrosse. I've run cold on it at the pro level, basically. I find that market tends to pound the table and say, come play pro lacrosse here. And then when you do, they don't always buy a ton of tickets and show up. So it's like, you kind of run, like, they produce a ton of talent down there, and it's a growing area for the sport, but they haven't always put a bunch of butts in seats at the pro level. At the college level, I think you saw, like, people will make that trip for a game of that caliber to Atlanta, and the community there will show up for a game. So I think that was huge. The broadcast was great. I was going to call out, too, the no football lines. They made it, and it felt like a Final Four Memorial Day weekend kind of game.
Yep.
For me, watching the game, I think the plays that kind of made it for me, or a lot of where I kind of went to, are Maryland's polls. I thought their defense played a pretty great game. Will Schaller in particular, I think, is a guy whose name probably didn't get said a lot when it came to preseason awards or recognition at all, and that is not going to be the case at the end of this year. Obviously, his play, the one that made the rounds on social media, was game-changing. He's diving in front of his shot on an empty netter and keeps the ball out, and then wins the run-out too, I think. Like,
Yep.
that was a get you off the couch kind of play, but I think their defensive group of Schaller with Canfield and Larkin, McDonald being healthy, and Burley, like, they can find matchups that they like against everybody. Those guys can all kind of shuffle to different players, and it gives them this defense group that can look. If you can do it against Notre Dame, if you can limit Notre Dame's attack, Notre Dame's offensive depth, because of how deep and versatile you can run with your poles and your D middies, you can do it against anybody. And it kind of positions them in a way where it's like there's no matchup for their defense that feels insurmountable. You kind of tack Logan McNaney on at the back end of that, and you kind of see what's possible for this team is a deep run, because they could seem to be able to stop everybody. McNaney obviously saved the game late with that kick save. That was incredible. But he was, I thought, outstanding in net for the whole day. But really the story for me here was Maryland's defense being able to find matchups they're comfortable with a group of 5 poles that seemed like they could all kind of be interchangeable. They're all happy to kind of play anywhere. Larkin, I would trust guarding a midfielder. I would trust him guarding somebody at X. They're all kind of able and capable to take away some of the best attackmen and best dodgers in the country. So to me, a big story in this game was the fact that Maryland's defense was able to match up as well as they did with the Notre Dame offense.
Yeah, I totally agree. That, like, I talked on the show about how I like to just look at the box score, circle things. Like, if you were just to look at the stats from this game, you would think Maryland got blown out. +7 in shots on goal for Notre Dame, plus 14 in shots in total. And the ground balls were 37-19 for Notre Dame. In the first and fourth quarter, Maryland picked up 3 ground balls in each of those quarters. It's just insane. But Maryland wins, and they're winning on defense. They're winning in plus They're plus in the transition category by a lot. Their transition defense is very good, which I think has been a staple of Till's teams over the years. And their transition offense is been very good this year too, especially with Larkin and Jack McDonald. And one thing, I obviously played for Tills. People know that I'm biased, and I think this is actually true about Coach Corrigan too. But like one thing I respect about Tills the most, I think, is his ability to and willingness to reinvent himself and reinvent his team. If you were to watch like the Rambo championship team and you would say years later that Tillman is running a run and gun transition focused team, it'd be like in what world? Like they won with the slowest pace because at the time their talent and the rules dictated that was the best way to go. And now they're kind of turning up the tempo and they're very good in transition. Spanos and Kelly especially are very opportunistic there. Don't want to overthink it. McNaney was awesome. He made 17 saves. Yeah. A lot of them were grade A saves. They probably gave up too many. And one takeaway I had coming out of the game was if you're Ohio State who has to play Notre Dame this week, this is like the worst case scenario for you because now you're getting an opportunity for that coaching staff to send a message to their players, a wake-up call for Notre Dame. And, one other thing I wanted to mention is like when you have these like historical seasons like last year, obviously there's talent, coaching, culture that goes into it, but like everything has to go your way. And I think there's two of them, but one of them was I think later in the game, Chris Kavanaugh had a wide open look and he went to the between the legs shot. A hard play. He doesn't know who's coming. He actually had more time, but it's hard. It's easy to armchair quarterback those. And McNaney stopped it. It just didn't feel like that ever happened last year. Like last year, it just felt like that was going in. It was a massive juice goal. The camera pans out. Irish Nation's going wild. And It's just like, wait, it was kind of like when Virginia lost a couple weeks ago. It's like Richmond's 10-manning Virginia and having success at Klockner. Like, what? And now it's like, wait, the between the leg shot didn't go. Like, it's just that's why you have to play the games. That's why it's so impressive when these seasons happen. But everything has to go right, and they just didn't get enough bounces.
Yeah, and it's a good call out on the tempo by Maryland too. People were kind of laughing about it, but like Maryland scored a shorthanded goal in transition in this game. We were like, is this a Tillman team? Is he still? Are we sure? Like, what is going on here? That happened. And then, on the Chris Kavanaugh goal, I think people have, or the not goal, the Chris Kavanaugh between the leg shot and save, as you said, easy to armchair quarterback. And I think plenty of people did. I will say he caught that ball basically with his heels on the crease and his back to the net. And I think he knows if he turns to the inside, he's a dead man. And if he turns to the outside, he doesn't have any goal anymore. Like there's no angle left. To me, a shot like that is not an insane shot in that spot. I didn't hate it when he did it. I didn't hate it on replay. I think in the world of lacrosse we play now, that's just kind of a shot you kind of have to have. We're like not also, that long ago.
He scored them all the time. Like he just has the leeway to do it for sure.
It's one of those things where people see it now and it's regarded as a showboat or a flashy thing. The same way that I think maybe 30 years ago when somebody went behind the back and it was like, oh, he's showboating, didn't need to do that. It's like, well, now that's just something you have to be able to do. Like sometimes the angle is such and the way the game is such that that's the correct shot. And I think a between the leg shot where Chris was standing and where he was, the way the play was happening was honestly not a bad shot in that spot. Yeah,
totally agree. Another thing interesting, both teams in this game played 26 players. That's a lot. And just an interesting thing to continue to watch. For example, Richmond, Cornell, and Cornell played 3 midfield lines at times. They played about 22 players each. So 26 is a lot. And I think if you were to look back at some of the late no shot clock era, there would have been several teams going with like 18 guys and really trying to do it tight. So we're seeing a lot of guys in these games, and it's helped. And I think Maryland is just this like anonymous team. They got the breakout from Schultz in this one, 2 goals, big time recruit. Whittier, Ford, and Keegan were listed as the starting midfielders, but it seems like any possession, anyone can come out. They have Aitken, Schultz, Armitage, Dubik plays on the man up, Stobaugh, Dowd, like just the names kind of keep going. So it's you never know who's going to come, and to be honest, like I think something that's helping Maryland is you really don't know what they're running. Like it's just like something. There's so multiple and there's so many different players playing that I don't think teams know how to match up with them. And the same way they don't care about matchups on defense, I don't think they care who's covering them on offense, and they just kind of keep going. So it's a formula that's obviously worked really well so far, and a big win for them after losing to Notre Dame a couple times, obviously in the regular season, and then getting smoked in the national championship game last year. That had to have felt good.
Yeah, I think running as deep as they do is a good call out too. I have not looked at this. I would imagine there is a correlation between teams that run the deepest and teams most likely to get to Memorial Day weekend. I am of the opinion that you can't get to the Final Four without midfield depth, without more than just two short stick D middies who can play for you, without a couple of guys who are not your top six who can still run by somebody.
Right.
And, I think teams like Maryland running that deep, it's a reason why they're always successful is because they find a way to do that. And I think the teams that run much shorter tend to bow out sooner, tend to have a harder time because it's just difficult to do that. I think Georgetown last year kind of left the tournament earlier than I thought they would, and they did not run very deep. They did not run a ton of guys beyond their top six. So I would imagine if you dug into that, I have not, but I would imagine there is a correlation between teams that consistently run, 24, 25, 26 guys, that kind of thing, and teams that routinely are, their Final Four weekend.
Yeah, and obviously there's two sides to it. These teams are they're deep enough to do it. They recruit well enough, yada yada. So there's two sides of it, but it is interesting. And I was going to write about it before the season, and now I wish I did because you're seeing third lines come out almost every game now, and historically that was pretty rare. So, okay, we're going to kick it right now to our interview with Eric Spanos. Big thanks to Alyssa at Maryland for getting this set up, and thanks for Eric for sitting down. It was great catching up with a former teammate of mine and talking about the hot start for the Terps. Let's get right into it. This is Eric Spanos. All right, pleased to be joined by Maryland Terrapin attackman, my former teammate, Eric Spanos, fresh off a big win over Notre Dame down in Atlanta, and Terps #1 in the polls as of Monday. So what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm great, man. Definitely a big win. Guys are feeling good, but at the same time, with that #1 next to our name, it doesn't change anything, right? We're going day by day, just trying to get better. Our memo is, just go 1-0. Practice each week like it's the same, regardless of who we're playing.
So we were just talking about it, before you got on, but it seemed like a really cool venue, really cool field, and a great crowd. Kind of for people that weren't able to get there, what was it? What was the vibe like down there?
Yeah, it was actually very awesome. When you play in something like this, that's a fundraiser too. You're playing for something bigger than yourself. The Lacrosse Out Cancer is something that was super awesome. And just being able to even be a part of that is just something we really put a high emphasis on. But Bobby Dodd Stadium was awesome. It was my first time, along with many others, being there. And, the crowd was packed. The crowd was into it. And it was just overall a great atmosphere.
Yeah, I thought on TV to watch it, I thought it looked excellent. I loved not having the football lines. It felt like I was watching a Memorial Day weekend game. Did you guys prepare for it like a Memorial Day weekend kind of game? Like knowing it's a #1, #2? I know you're saying like we try and keep it the same, but I don't know. If it was me, I would probably have a hard time not being a little more jacked up for a Notre Dame, for #1, #2 with that venue, the whole thing.
Yeah, we were definitely, jacked up, but at the same time with, everything that happened last year, that's last year, and something we kept saying a lot is, we're not going to get it back. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Is it's a new season. It's the 2025 Maryland Terrapins versus the 2025 Notre Dame Irish, right? And so that's something we really regarded last week and we're thinking about. And, it's definitely good practice just playing in an atmosphere like that with, neutral site and thinking about it like that Final Four aspect, yeah.
We've talked about how, and a lot of people talked about how a lot of different pieces, always kind of different lines over the last 2 years. You guys have really kind of kept working to find the right things. But you and Urxa and DK have really played together a lot now. How do you think that kind of chemistry has developed, and how are you feeling kind of as a trio there?
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot of fun throughout the past 3 years. We've played with each other, maybe not on the same line or same attack line, but we've definitely, built that chemistry over practice. And just the more we've actually, been on the same lines, playing with each other and that type of thing. But it's been great so far. I mean, we really just enjoy playing with each other. I think we all complement each other in different ways. And I think one of the coolest things about it is just we don't care who scores, who gets the points. We're just happy. Like Braden goes out there and scores 5 goals a game. Me and DK are first wants to go right over to him, smack him on the head, be like, "Great job, man." That's one of my favorite things about playing with those two.
And as Donville mentioned, you guys have been together, but the portal era has kind of changed things for a lot of schools. Maryland's certainly one of them, where every year there's kind of a crew of whatever, 4, 5, 6 guys who come in for a year and then they're gone. For you, as somebody who has been there for these years, how is it every year kind of bringing in a new batch of guys who are going to come over in the portal as grad students? How do you kind of get them ingrained in what it means to, play at Maryland, and get them up to speed on kind of the culture stuff, knowing they're going to be there for 1 year and then you're going to have to probably do it again with a new batch of guys next year?
Yeah, and I think Donville can attest to this, being a 1-year guy that came in through the portal. But no, Coach does a great job in his selection of guys. He chooses guys that he can see being Maryland guys, and then when guys come into our program, their biggest thing is they're just like, "What can I do to win?" The biggest thing, like if it's being on the bench, we're winning. I don't care. If it's playing, we're winning. I don't care. And just getting that mentality instilled right away is something that's one of the biggest things. And then also just right when they get here, just having them established with everything, with us all the time, if we need to like bring them along in certain things, like, "Hey man, let's go get some shots up," and stuff like that. But most of the time, like I said, especially with a guy like Donville, he just, came in right away and brought this great sense of leadership. And that's what we see with a lot of our guys this year as well.
Talking about guys that I played with and obviously still there. Dan brought up the guys who are new, which is a great point. But obviously Logan's been there forever. Wearing the number 1 this year was awesome on the weekend. Just what's it like, kind of knowing that he's back there?
Yeah, it's definitely awesome, and you can't really find a bad thing to say about Logan McNaney, right? I mean, he makes a save that people just are like, "What the hell? Like, how did he do that?" And just having him down there, I've said this before, it's just when Logan makes those big saves, it's this juice that our team just resonates with, and we can feel it. Like, he makes that crazy save, we're like, "All right, like, let's go. We're getting the ball back here. Like, time to go, time to get one and build off of Logan making that big save." And I think something we saw this weekend is like Logan was able to, make a few big saves that led to big plays for us. And like I said, we really just feed off of his big saves, and they do a lot for our team that people might not see on, like, watching our game on TV or in person.
Before you jumped on, we were talking about the Notre Dame game this weekend, and Maryland playing with some tempo. We were laughing like, it was something people couldn't believe as they saw it. But Maryland scored a shorthanded goal in transition. We were like, does John Tillman still coach this team? We were like, I can't believe the pace that they're playing with, or that they're eager to play with. For you, having played kind of on a team that played a little bit slower, and now a team that maybe is comfortable playing a little bit faster, do you have a preference? Do you like to play faster, slower? Which kind of way do you think better suited to the lacrosse you like to play?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely just like to kind of play in the flow of games. I think that's something that really helps me. And, every game's not going to be this high tempo, super fast pace, and some games are going to be a lot slower than others. But, when you're in that game and you're able to get a few in transition, those are definitely some big goals that I think every team in the country searches for and hunts for, because those are able to get everyone going. The guys on the bench feed off goals like that. So, being able to play fast is definitely fun at times, but every game's not going to be like that.
What's it like specifically with having AJ and Jack McDonald, guys with the long stick who obviously handle it pretty much like short sticks? What's it kind of like just having the confidence that you guys can kind of treat them like a midi coming down?
Yeah, it's definitely just an advantage to us, right? Having those guys be so skilled with the ball, picking the ball up, and running around with it, being able to make plays. It's just, like I said, advantage to us. We're able to trust them to throw some tough passes that are able to give us shots, and they're also able to run the field, probably some of the best in the country, and they're able to push that ball forward to get us going too. So it's definitely huge for us.
How many times did that AJ Larkin jump shot come up in film that week?
Yeah, it was definitely shown, but
a couple times.
Yeah, he may have watched it a few times.
Yeah, his score break time was up that week.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I was going to ask, Will Schaller also made quite the play as a pole this week. He's diving in front of a shot and blocking it on that kind of frantic play. For you on the other end of the field, seeing that, what were you thinking as Will kind of leaps through the air and dives in front of a shot to keep it out?
Yeah, I honestly got this sense of like adrenaline. Seeing him make such a tough, just hard-nosed play like that, I was like, we're doing whatever it takes to win this game. Like, we have guys putting their bodies on the line like that. It just really got everyone in like a great mind space, and we were all just super, jazzed up after that play.
Awesome. Well, Dan, you got anything else, or?
Well, you get Delaware this week. How do you kind of keep yourselves where you're at? You're number one. Like you said, you're trying to keep it kind of level. What's the key for you guys to stay level and maintain that ranking where, no disrespect to Delaware, they're not Notre Dame. It's a different level of game to be played.
Yeah, kind of like I said, Delaware is going to be the same game as Notre Dame. Notre Dame was the same game as Princeton. Princeton was the same as Syracuse. We could go down the line. That's something we just do here. We got to go 1-0 each week. Every opponent's the same, and people are going to be coming for us. We know that, and so we'll be ready for that. But definitely just trying to take every week, game by game, go 1-0 each week. It's something that we really preach and believe in.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining, man. Good luck. Proud of everything you're doing out there, and love watching you do your thing. So keep it going. Best of luck rest of the year, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, man. Great talking with you guys.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Later.
Okay, so next game we have up here, we'll go quickly. Cornell versus Richmond. Funny experience for me on the weekend. My roommate is Ryan Lanchbury, leading scorer, either him or Dalton Young, leading scorer in Richmond history. So when I turned the game on at 6-1, not great, but Cornell battled back. Third win in 8 days after a long stretch that included a nice win over Denver, a midweek game at Hobart, and then they busted down to Richmond, which obviously not that close to Cornell. So good win for the Big Red, and Richmond is good. This was not like it obviously was a game of runs in terms of the 6-1 start for Richmond, and then kind of sustained run for Cornell after that. But Richmond is very good. They beat Virginia. Their only losses are to number 1 Maryland and number 3 Cornell. So the Spiders are for real.
Yeah, I think Richmond ended up, they get that early lead. He said they get out to 6-1. I think where they get done in this game is they just could not win a face-off. They could not just kind of keep possession tilted a little bit. I don't think they would have taken the air out of the ball or anything like that, but like when you look at the Cornell offense, there's never going to be a game that they're out of. And if they are consistently winning faceoffs, you take that 6-1 lead and you kind of need to either just build it to a point that's, I guess, if you can push it to like 10, maybe you feel okay. Maybe not even then. But I think Richmond struggling at the faceoff spot ultimately kind of just caught up with them in this game because Cornell with a possession advantage like that is just going to find the back of the net. I still consider Richmond, like you said, they're good. They're a legit team. I think coming into the year, we kind of wondered, no Dalton Young, no Luke Graham, who's gonna kind of be the leader of the offense. I think Aiden O'Neill has passed that test with flying colors. I think he's been exceptional for them to start the year. One of the better, I think, kind of breakout years of the season so far is Aiden O'Neill. I would make Richmond an easy favorite in the A-10. They play a brutal schedule, and it's credit to Coach Giamatti to do that every year. They just kind of took Cornell to the wire. They've already played, again, they've beaten Virginia. They still have to play Duke and Georgetown. So come tournament time and come kind of the big days of the season, the April, May games, it's when you kind of start to feel good about them. For Cornell, I think we love the way their defense looked against Denver. I thought Jason Singer in that game in particular looked great. I still think he's a really good defenseman, but the defense did not play nearly as well against Richmond, I thought. In the 6-on-6 kind of settled in particular, I thought there was much more kind of obvious kind of deficiencies for them. So I think that was a spot where we kind of knew maybe Cornell was a little bit weak on the defensive end. I like him in goal, but I think the unit in front of Wyatt Nuss could use a little bit of polish. But I think if you're Cornell, you kind of just want to see them get back to a consistent level of where they were against Denver, where it felt like they were aggressive, they were disruptive of kind of the key weapons, and they weren't really able to do that as much against Richmond for me.
Yeah, I think certainly the travel and the games in all the 1 week had something to do with it. Richmond played pretty good offense. That's the other thing is Giamatti's just a good coach. They're a tough out. Yeah. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They're perfect in the clearing game, which actually didn't seem like they were perfect in the clearing game in the in the watching the game with the eye test, and then they were only 13 turnovers, so they didn't beat themselves. Also, Vigu, the goalie for Richmond, is really good. I was going to save it for my FAFO, but I'll just do it now. Hunter Smith, Mitchell Dunham, and Michael Farrell is the close defense group for Richmond. They are really talented, and I think Smith is drawing a lot of the big matchups. He was on CJ. I think he also covered McCabe Millen, but they're doing a nice job on some of these elite players. Now, Cornell guys still got their numbers, but I think Cornell probably has the best attack unit in the country. Certainly the Notre Dame guys are in there. The Princeton guys are very good, but I was really impressed with that group. And that's like I said, in combination with that Virginia game when they did a nice job on McCabe and the other guys down low for Virginia. So if you're going to go at Richmond, you got to come correct with the attack, and those guys are talented. And obviously, Dunham is a punisher too, so it's a long day against them. But I thought the Cornell guys did a good job and came through in the end. CJ still had a hat trick. Mikey Long scored the biggest goals of the game there. And but you're I think spot on. 19-8 Cornell faceoffs. That is going to be tough to overcome. And Cascadon was obviously the star of the faceoff, 16 for 23. But then Michael Melkonian goes in and wins 3 out of 4. That makes a big difference if your second guy can go in there and win them as well. So a good day overall for Cornell. I thought it was a little unfair, to be honest, that they were 3 and not 2 in the polls. Polls are not worth getting upset about, but if you're a preseason top 5 team and you still haven't lost yet, I think you deserve to be in there over a one-loss team. But that is just my opinion. And if you're going to say I'm biased, no shit.
I voted them 4.
4. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to throw my microphone at the wall. Okay, let's talk about a team who presumably you had 3, Princeton Tigers.
I was going to say, perfect segue. I voted Princeton 3 because I considered Princeton's 2-0 weekend against UNC and Duke more impressive than Cornell's win over Richmond. I thought the Tigers going down to go and going 2-0 in 2 days with basically a day of rest between Carolina and Duke was impressive. I think they played Carolina second, and it's worth noting that Carolina was a fresher team in that game because Carolina beat the brakes off of Penn the day before and was resting their starters for the entire fourth quarter. So you would say Carolina probably had the fresher legs, and Princeton still came up with a win. I think kind of standouts for me, kind of for Princeton over the weekend, were two guys on the defensive end. I thought Michael Bath had an exceptional weekend. I thought if you look at the score sheet and you look at the stats and stuff, he probably had whatever, like 7-8 ground balls over the course of the weekend, probably a couple caused turnovers. But man, if there was a ball between the lines to be won, he was either the one winning it or he was playing a physical game, and so somebody else on his team could win it. I thought his impact in possession for Princeton on the weekend was tremendous. I thought Michael Bath really was the guy who jumped out on tape from Princeton for sure for me. And then I thought we all got a really nice introduction to Jackson Green this weekend. He obviously had the highlight play where he put his shoulder into somebody and leveled them going from defense to offense and then scored a goal. But Jackson Green is the guy that Matt Madelon gives the ball to at the last 20 seconds of a game to outrun a double team and kill the clock. He's a walk-on from the football team. He's a wide receiver. Like, he has blazing speed, but I thought his play between the lines, his play in coverage, I thought Jackson Green had a very good weekend on a against two teams where he would have tough assignments, right? North Carolina runs a deep offense. The Duke midfield has some weapons that can be very tough to cover. So I thought Jackson Green had a great weekend, and then Michael Bath really stood out for me for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because in watching the games, the Princeton defense felt a little bit better than, they gave up 14 obviously against Duke and then 12 against Carolina. It feels a little bit more stout than that watching it. And, I went a little deeper on the Carolina game than the Duke game, but the big takeaway is Princeton recruits at such a high level that they're individually very, very talented. There are very few guys getting toasted off the dodge against a Carolina team where I think that's their strength, his ability to break guys down off the dribble, so to speak. So probably a few more missed coverages, missed assignments than you'd like for Princeton on the weekend. A few gambles probably that they want back. I've said this before, but as an offensive guy, I just can never understand why guys go over the head. It still happens all the time. And I'm sure that defensive guys can never understand why offensive guys go low to low, or, there's each position's got bad habits, but they made a couple gambles, especially against Duffy, that punished them. Also, Croddick, not his best statistical game in the Princeton or in the Duke game, but responded very nicely in the Carolina game. He's a keeper in the net. So, so we kind of covered the Duke game. Any thoughts on Carolina?
Yeah. I would say as a defensive guys go over the head because it's like when the Coyote's chasing the Roadrunner and he sees the Roadrunner and he imagines it just turn into like a cooked turkey, and it's just right. Oh, it looks so good. It's right there. Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely going to be able to just grab it. He's definitely not going to rug pull me and just embarrass me. I'm going to go flying off the cliff. We are all the Coyote in that moment. For Carolina, I thought a good week for their supporting cast, particularly against Penn. I think you watch them play Hopkins and you watch Duffy and Petro play 2-on-6 and win the game. And, if you can do that, then great. But that's tough to do to take you to meaningful places in the season. I think to take you to the kind of places that Carolina's trying to go. So to see them play Penn, who, again, great defense and a great goalie for Penn. They put up 16, and 12 of the goals were from guys who aren't named Duffy or Petromala. So I think, you see one from Matan, one from Price. I think English had a couple. Harshberger got one. Dupuis got one. Like, that kind of depth of scoring, I think, was something people were eager to see for them, particularly after the way they beat Hopkins. I thought the Carolina, Quint has been calling them kind of the no-name defense. I thought they were a little bit exposed against Princeton in terms of individual matchups. I thought the Kabiri matchup in particular was one where they were struggling, but they were very good and quick to kind of slide and recover and play better team defense, which is, if you can do that well, it helps make up for the fact that maybe you can't cover one-on-one against. Look, Princeton's attack's going to do that to a lot of people. Yeah. But I thought Carolina's slide and recovery against, to the Kabiri matchup in particular, in places where they thought, maybe we'll have a hard time here. I thought they executed well in that, but that was the first time I've seen their defense kind of really, to me, kind of be more clearly struggling with one-on-one matchups. Gianfrancaro, I thought, was outstanding.
He was.
And bailed them out a few times against Princeton for sure, where somebody got cooked and a really good look got taken, and Gianfrancaro came up with a save for them. So him bailing them out kind of covers it on the stat sheet a little bit. But I think the tape would tell you that was the first time the Carolina defense to me really looked like with one-on-one matchups, they were having a hard time.
Yeah, admittedly, I hadn't got a chance to watch a lot of Princeton last year, but like Kabiri's he's bigger than the quick guys, and he's quicker than the big guys, and so he's guarded by Kai, who's got great feet, so he's pretty good on the change of direction, and then his first goal, Kabiri, he gets up in the high wing, just puts his shoulder down and turns kind of almost like a Pat Spencer kind of power turn, and just crushes it lefty. So when you're thinking about guys who have to cover Kabiri, it's a lot. Like, you're asking a lot. You need a guy who can really get his hips down and chop the feet. And then you need a guy who can still bang, because he's bigger than a lot of the quick attackmen you see. And then the other thing is, like I said, I haven't watched a ton of Princeton. I mean, Mackesy he's awesome. I mean, first team All-American. I'm not breaking any news here. But when you have your best player who's not your lead dodger, I pretty much played on teams like that my entire college career with Teeter and Wisnauskas. It's such a luxury, because you feel like you have to do so much to guard against Kabiri and these midfielders, and then waiting on the backside is the most talented guy on the field. And Maxey made some big plays. His release is sick, super smooth, super accurate. The play he made in transition was really nice. So yeah, just a lot of weapons there.
I would bet he's a teammate of yours this summer.
Well, that's I get paid to play, and you get paid to.
I won't ask you to comment. But,
yeah, no comment.
Look, the OC for the Cannons and the OC for Princeton are the same person. I think.
Yeah,
I would bet he wants to keep that lefty weapon. I mean, Mackesy. My thing with Mackesy is, and it's almost, I don't want to be too lofty here, it's almost Josh Byrne-like, the way it seems like he can just kind of take a step in a direction, dodge. It's just like, oh, his hands are just free and he can shoot now. He's just so good at just kind of little movements to make a little bit of space, and then he can shoot. And if he's able to get his hands free and shoot like that, it's deadly. Byrne is another guy who's like that, particularly outdoors, where it's like, it looks like the defenseman's right in front of him, and it looks like all he does is take a step upfield, but all of a sudden he's in a great shooting angle. And Mackesy does that for me.
Yeah, totally agree on Mackesy. And another guy who I think is going to be playing in our league at some point is Chad Palumbo. 4 goals in the second half, kind of the perfect guy to play off some of these guys. I was thinking, like, you need to put that clip of Eamon McEnany saying just too big, just too big, just too big of Chris Kluche a few years ago over the Palumbo clip. Because he just goes through 4 guys, and then you mentioned offensive coordinator Jim Mitchell, someone I'm pretty tight with. That was a set piece, the fake flip at the end of the game. That was the winning goal against Carolina. Sick play. Palumbo gets wide open, and how do you know it's a set piece? Well, 1, because it's a bunch of random stuff that everyone knew exactly what was happening, and 2, because they all pointed at the bench after it goes in. So Mitch is a wizard, one of the smarter guys I've ever been around, and dials it up there when his team needed one.
Yeah, you're skipping ahead to my FAFO with the Palumbo shout out there.
Oh,
Spoiler
shit.
Alert,
Okay. Just 6 turnovers in the Carolina game for Princeton. That is pretty good. 4 of them were in the clear. So, 21-9 face-offs for Carolina. You are not going to win very many games like that. Something Princeton's probably going to have to get figured out. But still, the Tigers are a massive weekend to come off those 2. I don't think we're going to go super deep on the Penn stuff because there's just so many good games to get to. We want to keep this moving. But a tough weekend for Penn, obviously. Seems like a pretty good event down there to have those 2 teams on. And,
I think all I would say for Penn is, like, when I watch them play, if the other team gets to 12 or 13, I'm like, starting to think it might be out of reach. They just need to find some guys. They need to find guys who could score goals. So they need to find something else, another gear for their offense somehow. They just can't score consistently. Yeah,
another thing that was interesting that I wrote about before the season, I'm talking about it on the show, but who's going to win the Kelly Award as the best goaltender because, and this is not a shot at Emmett Carroll, but to win those goaltender awards, there's like so many things that have to go into it. You have to play well on TV. You have to have team success, all that stuff. So McNaney had like a Heisman moment basically on TV. Gianfrancaro has been getting like effusive praise that seems completely deserved on all the UNC broadcasts. So it's going to be an interesting, first team All-American race. Obviously, Fracion at Penn State still in the mix. Vigu at Richmond's been awesome. So just kind of an interesting storyline there as we go throughout the rest of the season. I didn't get a ton of time to dig in to Hopkins, Virginia. Another good win for Hop, who just keeps winning games against good teams. So if you want to go on that, go ahead. And if not, we can move on to FAFO of the week.
I think I only would say, I think Hopkins deserves a little bit of credit because they won the game without Russell Melendez, didn't play. I thought Charlie Eiler played pretty well in relief. And Hopkins was down at halftime, and they had to kind of gut it out. I think it shows you that UVA is still not an opponent. I know they're they're ranked 20. They're barely hanging on in the poll, but the talent is what it is. And if you overlook UVA, they will bury you. So I think Hopkins deserves some credit for going without who has been their best offensive player all year and winning that game in a game where they had to come back in the second half to do it and do it basically in dramatic fashion near the end of the game. So I give Hopkins some credit for that. I thought UVA showed a little bit of panic late. They had time at the last faceoff there to kind of run something, and it sort of became chuck the ball down the field and just try and get it towards the goal. I don't know if they needed to be doing that yet, and that's unusual for a Lars coach team and for that kind of group of guys to do that. So I was a little surprised to see that. That might just be a symptom of the way the year has gone, just kind of shaking these guys a little bit. Yeah.
Yep, no doubt. There's a lot of factors that go into it. There's a reason that we're seeing a lot of scrambled play this year because there's a lot of new players out there. And like I said, we're not seeing these juggernaut teams. We talked about that enough today. Let's move on to FAFO of the week. I'll get us going here. There's been much discussion about the proliferation, there's a big word, of lacrosse podcasts. I've certainly noticed it myself, so it's hard to be completely original on some of these takes. But my FAFO is Colgate. The Raiders have wins over Albany, Harvard, Villanova, Loyola. They are 8th in scoring offense. In a down year for Lehigh, a down year for Loyola. We know Army's going to be very good. Other than that, Patriot is pretty wide open. They're 10-manning everybody. They're playing up and down, and it's just a fun story so far. Probably them and Fairfield are probably the two best feel-good stories of the year so far. And, I like shouting out the Raiders. Hamilton, New York, beautiful, beautiful spot if you ever get a chance to go, nestled in the Finger Lakes just up the road from Cornell. So, the Raiders are my FAF of the week.
I had written down as one of mine as a possible one was Colgate's ride in particular. Don't make me tap the sign with that just says if your 10-man has no ball pressure, it's a bad 10-man.
Yeah, you can score.
So Colgate 10-man's the right way, man. They get after people. They play like rabid wolves at the 10-man. I thought their ride, if you want to watch their ride really go to work, watch the Loyola game this week. Loyola cleared 22 of 37 against Colgate. Colgate caused 9 turnovers just on the ride. 15 failed clears. 9 of them caused by the ride. The others are ones where Loyola basically just has to chuck the ball up the field. So Colgate's ride, I think, deserves a FAFO. But my other one was Chad Palumbo, who you mentioned. Could not miss in the second half against UNC. 4 second-half goals. The one clip is making the rounds where he bids like it's Palumbo versus the universe, and Palumbo wins. He goes through 4 defenders and goes and scores a goal. I thought him fighting through those guys and dunking it was like watching an FAFO happen in real time. So Palumbo was one. And I also wanted a shout out because he deserved it, is Bobby O'Grady at Marquette. Became Marquette's all-time leading scorer this week, passing Ryan McNamara. He deserves a FAFO shout out too.
There you go. Love it. On that note, actually, Luke Rustarucci, we've talked about him on the show. We've given VMI their flowers on this show. I believe second in the nation in scoring right now. So kid's having a year. A few honorable mentions. One I had was that Richmond close defense. Dunham is a pain in the butt to play in the best way possible. And then Smith, number 6, has been really good. Also, I had Carson Kramer on Princeton. He hammers it. He reminds me a little bit of the who's the man up specialist for Hopkins a few years ago. He would just come in and shoot it. For number 44, I think was his name.
Degnan.
No. This is a few years. This is like before my time in school. I want to say Foley, but that's my buddy Pat Foley, who was a defender. But anyways, Hopkins had the guy who's escaping my name, but Kramer hammers it. So I like watching him shoot the lacrosse ball.
Yeah, from my era, he reminds me of a guy like Mike Springer at Syracuse, where it was like he would step into these shots. He was bigger than everybody else, and then he would step into these shots that like then were going, it was like, low hundreds, and that was like unthinkable. I actually worked a lacrosse camp that Mike Springer was coaching at once when my like high school days, but people were going to stand behind the net with the radar gun to tell the kids what Springer was shooting it at. And we had to like draw straws to see who was going to be the guy to do it. Because this net had been like torn up all week and it was just zip tied up to the frame to try and get it up. And Springer starts shooting and he's hitting corners, and no joke, the zip ties are just flying off. They're just snapping off the net as he's taking these insane shots. And the kids are like, they've never seen anything like it. And we're back behind the net with the gun, just like hoping that this thing doesn't murder us. But yeah, that's who he shoots like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What else? Any honorable mentions in there?
I think that was basically all the ones I had for my FAFOs. I had the Colgate ride, Palumbo, and then an honorable mention. You had a Bobby O'Grady at Marquette.
Okay, love it. And apparently us for starting a lacrosse podcast this year.
Yeah,
big faux pod, depending on who you talk to. Okay, Sicko game of the week. I have one. I'll let you go first, though.
I have one as well. I can give you a second if we need it, but I got Bellarmine and Robert Morris as mine.
Nice.
Bellarmine's got the Alley Boys, John and Joe. Both of them are scoring machines. They filled it up against Marquette this week, even though they lost. John went for 4-2. Joe is climbing the ranks of my King Bucket list. If you don't know, I keep track of the players in the country who pile up the most goals without recording an assist.
Yeah.
Current leader is Alex Marinier at Ohio State, who's at 21-0 right now. But Joe is sitting at 14 goals, 2 assists. So he's on that bucket list. I think these guys are a ton of fun to watch. I think Robert Morris has won 3 straight. They just beat the brakes off Hobart, and that's not nothing. They have a 1-2 punch in attack. David Burr, Callum Brannon, who are both fun to watch. They've got Elijah Edwards as a pole for them, who's got 4 points this year. So if you're looking for kind of a game where it's like, look, I don't think you were probably planning on watching Bellarmine and Bobby Moe, but that could be a fun, high-scoring, like shootout, have a good time kind of game. That's a good Sicko game for me. Yeah,
I love it. Elijah Edwards plays his junior A for the Orangeville Northmen. Very good player up there. Joins a long legacy of Canadians at Bobby Moe. My game is Dartmouth and Utah. Obviously they're 2 pretty good teams, so it's on the Sicko border. But it's kind of what are we going to do this year game for both teams. Dartmouth is 4-1, some nice wins. The Utes had that big win that we discussed in length on this show, and then haven't won since then. But they lost. They lost twice by a goal, and then they lost by 2 goals to Denver. So it's all been pretty close. And if you're Dartmouth, getting a 5-1 or 6-1 before you start the Ivy, it's kind of like, are you gonna get past where you've been in recent seasons, or is it going to be kind of more in the same? Because they have started well before, but they've had some nice wins so far. They beat Vermont, which was a good win. I think they beat Vermont. I had that was doing that right before the show, but a big opportunity for the Big Green with a great coaching staff, and also an unusual Ivy this year. Yale obviously is really struggling. Brown is in the first year of a new coaching era. So if you're Dartmouth saying we have a chance to go 5-1, maybe 6-1, and then there's maybe a few gettable Ivy League games this year, like it's the opportunity's there. So, curious to see how that one goes.
Yeah, I like the look of Dartmouth this year. I have stopped picking against Coach Kerwin every week. I will never do it. That team's got some good leadership back. Guys like Parody, guys like Colin McGill is a great player. Like they have a good amount of Hopper Zappatello's putting in the goals for them. Like they've got a good group, and they're playing a decent schedule and winning. And I look at them and I'm like if they took the field against Yale today, I don't know if I'd pick Yale. I really don't. The way Yale's looked and the way Dartmouth's looked. So I think that's, I think Dartmouth is, I've been saying it this season, they'll be here faster than maybe you expected, faster than maybe people thought.
By the way, we don't talk about picks a lot on the show because I don't gamble, obviously, and I'm still playing, yada, yada. A big week for you on the picks front. You did the most dangerous thing in lacrosse, which is you allowed someone to put your face on a graphic with picks on them, and you went 5-0. So remember that the next time you go like 2-3 and you get shredded and people make fun of you, like how Jack and I made fun of you for not putting us at the top of your big board. You do know what you're talking about. So don't listen to the haters.
Can't go to 5-0 if you don't pick Maryland. Again, I made that pick doing the old everybody is picking against John Tillman, and that means the only correct move is to pick the Terps.
Yep, love it. Okay, let's jump into what feels like a really quiet weekend, to be honest with you, after this kind of mammoth slate we had last weekend. The headliner is Hopkins Cuse, the battle of who is more back. I don't know how long we get to do the who's back thing with these two teams because they've been in the hunt here the last couple of years, but that is solidly the best game of the weekend. What are you looking for?
I am going to go to the Dome and see this one in person, so I am excited for this. I've never been to the Dome before, but I think I'm looking at this game and looking at Syracuse, and I see the pressure. I know they're at home. I see the pressure squarely on them. This is a prove it, show me what you're about game kind of for Syracuse. Like I had said it going into last weekend, like, all right, they're playing Utah. Like I think we already can see in our minds what's going to happen here. They're going to go out there, they're going to style, they're going to score some nice goals. They're probably going to win comfortable. And we've seen that song and dance from Syracuse before enough times to know it when it's going to happen. But this is a game where it's like, if you're back, if we're doing the Q's is back thing, then go out and win this game by 4 or 5 goals. You know what I mean? The haters will have their Twitter fingers ready to go as soon as Scott Smith lines up across from Joey Spallina. They're going to want to see Joey do something to produce in that matchup. I think it's fair to say that Joey probably needs to do something to produce in that matchup this week. This is a game where, Q's needs to start being the dominant Q's that we see when they play Towson, when they play Utah. If you're back, I need you to do that against somebody we might not expect you to do it against. So I look at Syracuse as a team with pressure on them in that regard. Like you got Hopkins, a rival, coming to the Dome. If you are legit and you're serious about the Final Four this year, this is a game you should win. This is a game where you need to win and you need to, do it comfortable, with your stars having a day kind of game. So that's kind of my perspective on it coming into it is Syracuse, these are the games that matter on your schedule. I don't need to watch you put up, a 10-goal win over Utah again. I'm done watching that movie. Show me what you're about against the meat of the schedule here.
Yeah, I think, we're also starting to get, like, it's indoors. There'll be no weather involved. It's now into March. Like, let's see some crisper play out of everybody. And we've been talking about it a lot on the show. I don't mean to repeat myself, but I would expect this game to be pretty sticky from a slide perspective. I think both teams, the kind of common thought process of how to defend them is probably to try to not slide, especially if Melendez is out. Again, who's going to earn slides other than Collison if you're Hopkins, and then what are you going to do to scheme up some slides if you're Cuse? Scott Smith maybe the captain of the FAFO All-American so far. That guy sucks to play against. He's been outstanding, and we've been talking about it all year. But again, these big fan bases and these legacy programs, they want the team to be back. From the gate days of run and gun, shooting the lights out. Both these teams are better defenses than offenses, potentially, maybe. So I could see this being like an 8-7 slugfest, or maybe it opens up as rivalry games typically do. So expect anything. I'm excited that you're going to go to the Dome, one of the great venues in the sport. I took a lot of enjoyment out of winning there a few times. I also got crushed there in probably the worst game I've ever played in college lacrosse. So I've run the gamut at the Dome, but a great place to watch a game. So I'm excited to go in there.
Yeah, I think I think you mentioned Collison there. I think look, Syracuse has a great DC in John Aderna. He might be the best defensive coordinator in the sport. I think it's interesting, particularly if Melendez doesn't play. If you're Syracuse, you probably want Billy Dwan to be guarding Matt Collison, right? Like a big body on a big body, stuff like that. But it's challenging sometimes to do that because Dwan's going to be down low and Collison's going to be coming out of the box in the midfield. So, I guess how hard does Syracuse try to get to matchups they like with guys when it comes to maybe bumping some of their good cover pulls like Dwan into the midfield, maybe to cover a guy like Collison, as opposed to using whoever, Patrick Deans, whoever it might be, kind of for them. Do you want, or excuse me, I got the wrong team there. Instead of having, the Q's poles just naturally guard Collison, do you want to get Dwan up into the midfield to do it? Is that important to do? Is it not important to do? The way Syracuse tries to, you always can try and spot it sort of on a dead ball, or if kind of a push with possession, or like a loose ball push, any kind of stoppage. If you look around at the personnel and you see them all kind of looking, pointing, trying to find guys, and then shuffling around, or are they going to be comfortable to just say let's just line up with whoever, Dwan on whoever I guess ends up playing at attack if it's not Melendez. Do you use them on, I guess, like Jimmy Ayers or whoever it is down there? But the way Syracuse navigates those matchups and the way Oderna kind of schemes, particularly when it comes to, like you said, sliding, I think is going to be fun to watch, and you'll learn a lot about that, I think, in the early going.
Yeah, totally agree. Good shout by you there. That's interesting. They also have Michael Grace, who would be another Collison size guy, so they can kind of throw a couple bodies at him and maybe go from whoever's closer to him or whatever. They have some options there. Pretty interesting. Also, I should say probably the best game of the weekend is Penn State Cornell. I haven't watched a ton of Penn State this year, so kind of excited to see them play a little bit more. A dominant win over Yale, which it's been a tough start for the Bulldogs there, no doubt about it. A nice win over Navy, who's ranked. So coming off two kind of good wins in a row after the tight loss to Princeton, who looks like one of the best teams in the country. So I think Penn State is right there. Probably the best team that Cornell has seen so far this year as well. So excited to see how that offense goes. This game is going to be in Ithaca, which helps Cornell.
Yeah, I went up and I watched the Penn State Yale game in person this past weekend. I wanted to see Penn State play. Shout out to the Penn State alumni section, who I was sitting next to, for not being insanely drunk and cursing a ton because I had my kids with me. They had chirps that were having my kids laugh. So good stuff from you, Penn State alumni section. I think when I watched that Penn State team, number one, Matt Traynor didn't play for most of the game. I don't know if it was because he was banged up. I haven't seen too much reporting on it, or Penn State honestly just didn't need him all that much because they were pretty comfortable in that one. But I looked at Hunter Aquino in that game as a freshman is special for sure. I've kind of been watching Penn State on TV a little bit, following box scores and all that, but I wanted to see him in person, and he really does. He stands out. I wanted to go see him shoot the ball, and I think he had 5 assists in the game, and I don't think he scored a goal. So I think for him, a couple of things are going to take him to the next level. Number one is making really good friends with the strength and conditioning coach. He could use a couple of pounds, I think. But number two, I think when he kind of gets more comfortable getting his shot off in tighter quarters. Sometimes it's like he really wants the room to really have some airspace and step into one. He can do damage when he doesn't have that. And I know sometimes it's going to feel like maybe a bad shot, but right now I would trust him to take almost any shot on the field. I thought he was a special player. And I think Penn State's offense is just really, really well built. I think their defense gets more credit, or doesn't get enough credit, I should say, when it comes to winning one-on-one matchups. Kevin Parnham got the Chris Lyons matchup, and I don't know what the stats say, but to watch the game, I would say Kevin Parnham won that matchup, I thought, pretty handily. I think he's ready for matchups with some of the best dodging physical attackmen. I think he could be the guy you put on C.J. Kirst and kind of trust it. Alex Ross, I think, has been great for them too, but Parnham, I think, really stood out for me as a covered defender. So Penn State has the tools, I think, to win that game, but that could be a great one. Cornell's defense is going to need to play a much better game than they played against Richmond to handle the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, Parnham versus Kirst presumably will be a fun one. I believe Penn State took the matchup last year. Very handily, 20-9. So a revenge game here for the Big Red. Obviously, it being on Shilkoff Field is a nice little boost. Totally forgot what I was just going to say. I think let's talk just briefly about one more, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Ohio State basically has done the exact opposite of Utah. They lost to Utah, won 6 in a row since then. Not the most absurd quality of competition ever, although they did beat Virginia. And then Notre Dame, revenge game here after their first loss since last February. So,
yeah, I think it's tough to be the team that has to play Notre Dame after they lose. Being Notre Dame's get-right opponent is tough. I think for Ohio State, you look at their defensive personnel and you think maybe they'll be okay here. I think Bobby Van Buren, I kind of talked about him against Virginia where he made McCabe Millen a spectator. He's good enough to do the same this week to even a player like a Chris Kavanaugh. That said, I think the Notre Dame offense is better equipped than Virginia's to say, if he's not going to be a big factor for us, then we have other guys that can hurt you. I think the Notre Dame, I always look at the Notre Dame midfield as a place where they can win games because they run so deep and they're so good dodging there. The Ohio State rope unit's pretty good. But I think, Notre Dame, I think, wants to see a couple of things happen. They want to get a little bit more from their attack outside of Kavanaugh. You want to see kind of production across the attack group. They haven't seen that maybe against the big games yet. And then I think Matt Jeffrey, again, Connecticut bias, but Matty Jeffrey made some great plays against Maryland. Did not have a ton on the score sheet, but you can see he can already separate from short stick D-middies at the D1 level. And he can throw some, I know Adam Lamberti called one out on social, but he threw the pretty ridiculous seam pass that found Chris Kavanaugh on the doorstep. Logan McNaney saved it with his foot. Otherwise, that's the highlight you're seeing a ton is Matty Jeffrey throwing that pass to Chris Kavanaugh. So I think you look at Faison, Jeffrey up and down their midfield. It's easy for it's not easy, but it's reasonable for Notre Dame to get to a combination of midfielders or a group of guys where they say, these guys have it today. These guys, they can't cover them. We're going to go with them. And all of a sudden your defense is just under a ton of pressure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just about to say the exact same thing about Jeffrey. I think he's a really good player, was gaining separation against a Maryland rope unit that I think is pretty good, and had a few of those passes and a few good shots. He's had 7 shots, 4 on goal, a bunch of feeds that could have been a point. So no points for him yet, but he's been all around it. And I totally agree. I put an article or a video, out on Lacrosse Culture Daily on our social channels about the sweeps to the middle of the field for Notre Dame. They're going to score those on a lot of teams. So I think that's the key for Ohio State. And then it could be a slog to score against that Notre Dame defense, who I think is pretty good. Curious if Ohio State wants to up the tempo like Maryland, because if you don't get 3 transition goals, I think it's going to be hard to get to 10 a lot of nights against Notre Dame. So I think we'll call it there. We've been going here for a good while. A great interview with Eric Spanos and a lot of other good stuff in this episode. You're going to the Dome. I am going to Las Vegas to play. So should be a great weekend. And thanks for sticking with us here through a no episode week last week. Excited that we're back talking about lacrosse.
Love to be back, man. Happy to be with you.
All right, awesome. Thanks, and enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.